I want to use it because I really love that, like the friend that cares about your growth more than your feelings.
Yeah,
that was it.
That was a word.
That's a line. Yeah, I'm gonna use that all the time. Someone actually said, I had someone help me write my mission statement. That's what she wrote about me. She was like, your friend that cares about your growth more than your feelings.
You should say that's your friend.
Yeah.
All right, stand by again.
It's your girl Kadi.
Ask Kadi, the voice of reason. It's an advice show covering all kinds of topics that millennials face. That's my girl Kadi C, the friend that cares more about your growth than your feelings.
All right, everyone, welcome to another episode of Ask Kadi, the voice of reason, and I'm your host, Kadi C. I have a special episode for you guys. I always say I have a special episode, but this is really special because this is my first guest co-host for the season, and I wanted to discuss a topic that I think, of course, I feel like everyone could relate to or have experience. But I'm going to tell you a little bit about my guest co-host before we get into the topic. Her name is Rachel Sievers. She's a counselor, coach, and podcaster, which makes me excited because she knows what we do here with 8 years experience as a psychotherapist. She works with couples and individuals struggling with guilt, depression, anxiety, the list goes on. And today she's going to be our expert on this topic because although I like to talk about my experiences, this is a topic that I think I, too, need some insight on. So having her here will definitely give me that insight as well as me sharing that insight with you guys. So here's Rachel. Hi, Rachel.
Hi.
How's it going? I know we just had a brief conversation, but how are you today?
I'm good. I'm really good. I'm hot out here in California.
Yes, I forgot to mention. I forgot to mention that you're based in California. So I'm sure the heat is heating out there.
It sure is. But no, I'm great.
That's
great.
good
Thank
to
you.
hear. Well, speaking of the heat, the reason how I came up with this topic today, which is we're going to be discussing grief. I just came back from vacation a week ago. I went to the Dominican Republic, Punta Cana, just to have like a recharge or it was really just a vacation. So I really rested and got to connect with my family. And on my way back to the airport, leaving Punta Cana, it was a 1-hour ride from my resort. And I was just thinking about how happy I was, like the vacation. We had a great time. I got to connect with my cousins who met me there from France. I haven't seen them in a long time. Then I was thinking about me moving because I'm moving into a new apartment in October. And that's so exciting because I get to decorate. So I was really in a great spirits. And while in the midst of that moment, I literally started crying thinking about my father. So I know for those of you who listened to previous seasons, my father passed away in 2014 suddenly from congestive heart failure. Well, I wouldn't say it was suddenly, but we knew about his condition. We just really didn't understand it to the T. My sisters and I were still pretty young. And my dad, he's an immigrant from West Africa. So I don't think he fully understood either what congestive heart failure was. So he passed away, and grieving is something that I feel like I've been experiencing ever since then. But I struggle. I've gotten used to it, but I always wonder, like, okay, when does it stop? Because you do reach a point after it's been over, I guess, 7-8 years now. And you think like, okay, I've gotten accustomed to my person not being here anymore. But at the same time, you get those random moments of just emotion and sadness and crying. It's like, and it literally comes out of nowhere, like how it was for me. So I want to get your standpoint as a psychotherapy, first a therapist. At first, what is grief? Because we use it to describe these situations, but what's going on in the body and the mind when someone is experiencing grief?
Yeah, so grief is the process, the very normal human process that we go through anytime we've lost something that's important to us. So we usually attribute it to losing someone to death, right? But it really is the loss of a job, the loss of an animal, the loss of a relationship. It can be the loss of an object that was really important to us. It's that adjustment to no longer having that person or that thing or that situation or that relationship anymore. And so much of it is not having the future we thought we would have with that person or thing.
First, I feel like I'm gonna get emotional with this topic because I love that you mentioned that grief is not just losing someone to death, it's really losing anything of importance to you or an idea or a vision that you had or you thought it was going to work out a certain way and it didn't. I love that you use the word normal because grief is so uncomfortable that it's so easy to feel like, okay, this is not normal. Like, believe it or not, when my dad passed, like I went back to work maybe 5 days later. And honestly, that was my way to not deal. And there was so much going on at home. And it's like, I don't want to be around all these family members. And his body was flown back home. So I went back to work. I went through those tears and I thought I was good. It was probably like a month, 2 months, 3 months later. And I'm like, I'm sad. I miss my dad, but I went through the emotions and I'm good now. And it was a regular day at work. I worked at a call center and I got a call. Protocol was to ask for their date of birth. I asked the person their date of birth and their year was my dad year. Lost it. Literally, when I say lost it, not sad, quiet, silent tears. I'm on the phone with this patient like, like could not breathe. And I'm like, what the, and I'm not a crier in public. So the fact that I'm at work, we have cubicles. I know everyone was looking. I know everyone's used to me being just jolly and funny. And everyone's looking like, is she crying on the phone? The patient on the phone is like, because they can hear me sobbing, but I'm trying to fight through because I'm like, this is not happening right now. Like, why am I crying? So I had to wait for a moment, like a beat to like, I went to my manager. I need to take like a moment. And I went out there and I was crying. Someone came to me and I'm a person who never know what to say to anyone when they're grieving anything, like when they're in that state of emotion. She said to me, I'm going to tell you something someone told me when I lost my mom. It never gets better. You just get used to it. And that felt like a weight lifted off my shoulder because in addition to the emotion, because of the sadness I was feeling, it was also like what is going on with me? What is like, you know what I'm saying? When is this going to stop? When am I going to feel normal again? Like I cannot live with this type of heartache right now. Like, does it get better? So for her to make me feel like, okay, this is normal. You're never going to get over it, but you're going to get used to it, made me learn to live with it. So more so than often, I do have my breakdowns on death anniversaries and birthdays. But I remember I worked in the city and it was my dad's death anniversary. It was probably like last year or the year before. Thinking about him crying. But I'm in the city walking. I stopped and got my coffee. But like tears dropping. I was coming out of Dunkin' Donuts. I would never forget. Sobbing. But I was like still going through the day, like doing my normal morning routine. And I opened the door leaving Dunkin' Donuts and a guy looked like, did they get her order wrong? Because I didn't have my shades. So I'm really like, everyone sees me crying, but I'm just like walking out of Dunkin' Donuts with my coffee. So I learned to embrace that it is normal. But I want to know, is there a healthy/unhealthy way to grieve? Like, how do you know when it's something that, or something you're doing something that you shouldn't be doing when it comes to grieving?
That's hard. Well, okay, so first of all, two things. Anytime I'm guiding someone through the grief process, I tell them grief is going to make you feel crazy. It takes you on a roller coaster. You're going to be happy 1 second, angry the next second. Then you're going to be super sad. Then you're going to want to sleep all day. Then you're going to want to start a new workout routine. And then you're going to start thinking about some childhood abuse that happened. I mean, it takes you all over the place. And people literally feel like they're going crazy when they're grieving because it brings up so much. Now, what your friend said was like spot on. It's spot on. So it's not that it goes away. We never forget that someone passed away. We never forget that we broke up with someone. We never forget we lost that job. It's not like it's not there anymore. The clinical term for it's assimilation. So it's a part of my story, but it doesn't affect me the way that it used to. And this is, any type of trauma healing that we do or when we work through crisis or grief, it's all the same. Your story is now changed. And it's like getting used to this new story that I have. And the amount of time that it takes, people will always ask me, how long is this going to last? Because I can't do this.
Right. Literally.
And my answer is always longer than you fucking want it to. It will always take longer than you want it to. And however long that is, it's it's just going to take that long. And we can either be mad about it or we could just let it take that long, and it's okay.
Right.
It's
Oh,
okay.
that.
So,
Go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
so a healthy way of grieving, and where's the line between healthy and not healthy? Gosh, I mean, it depends on the person, right? Healthy way of grieving is when I feel joy, I allow myself to feel joy. When I feel relief, I just allow it to happen. When I feel sad, I allow myself to be sad. Whatever's coming up for me, to the greatest extent possible. I mean, we can't break down crying in the middle of a board meeting, or, it's life goes on and we have to keep doing the thing. But to the greatest extent possible, whatever comes up, you don't judge it. You don't do the suck it up buttercup bullshit. You don't pretend like you're not having those feelings. You just have them because they're all coming up for a reason. They are all furthering you down your path of grief. They're all there for a reason. We're built to feel these things for a reason. So feel them. And that's healthy. I would say the line, it's sort of this ambiguous, invisible line that changes from person to person. So it's really hard to describe it. When things stop working for you, it's no longer healthy. So if that glass of wine at night is no longer calming you down, but it's actually keeping you from sleeping well, it's not working for you anymore. So stop that. If, crying for 4 days on end actually makes you feel worse instead of better, it's not working for you anymore. So stop doing that. But you really have to know yourself, and you have to be honest with yourself.
Right.
Does this really work for me or not?
I feel like this concept when it comes to grief, when it comes to dealing with death, it's like when the person told me, like, okay, you never get over it. It's like, okay, kind of cool, because you don't want to feel like you forgot your loved one that passed. But when you mentioned we also grieve relationships that didn't work out, jobs that didn't work out, a life that we thought we were going to have that didn't work out that way. It doesn't make me happy to have to grieve that long term. And I think that's probably why people look for these like substitutes, whether it be alcohol and drugs, or try to jump into the next relationship, or, just try to numb themselves as much as possible. Because I feel like with death, at least the other option isn't an option. Meaning, okay, the person's no longer here. You really can't say, okay, if they were, you kind of get over or come to terms with the idea that they can't come back. But when it's like a relationship and it's a job, you kind of relive no, but like we could still be together. Like, I feel like that hope is still there, which makes it more difficult to grieve it in a healthy way, I guess, or want to deal with the grief. I don't know. What do you think?
That hope piece is typically part of the bargaining process. So when you hear about the stages of grief, that the bargaining stage is usually the part where we're holding on to the thing. Like, no, you can't die. We're going to try one more treatment. We're gonna gather everybody around. We're gonna pray for you until this cancer goes away, or I'm gonna get that person back. I'm gonna fight for him again. I'm gonna beg for my job back. We do this bargaining thing. So to me, I of course it's different from person to person, but my first instinct is to say, you're not done grieving yet. You're still bargaining. If you're doing that, you're not quite done yet.
I'm not.
But then there's that piece. Let yourself go there. Fully go there. Like, what would it look like to fight for that person?
Right.
Write the letter. I'm not actually saying send it, but
right.
Like, have you really let yourself feel all that and do all that yet?
That's so interesting. I never related that to grief, but I always tell my friends, like, when they have, let's say, that boyfriend that they need to let go, I'm never the friend to tell you to leave him, because if you're still contemplating, go again. Because eventually they will hurt you enough where it does not hurt no more. And that is the key. Like that until you no longer want it anymore. Because if you try to do, cold turkey, people try to do cold turkey, or even the ways of trying to numb yourself, whether it's jumping into another relationship or drugs and alcohol, it's still going to be there when you get when things settle down, or when things that the core of you that wants that situation, and I'm talking in regards to a relationship or that job, is still going to be there. And that's what you want to heal. You want to heal or come to terms that it's no longer an option, or it's not good for you, or this person is never coming back. That's the key to not necessarily grieving being over, but you being in a healthier place with yourself, So I always tell them, like, yeah, okay, you want to text them again? Go ahead. Even though in my mind, I'm like, this relationship is over.
I know where this is going.
Right. But sometimes I completely agree with you. Sometimes you have to allow yourself to go there, because it's the hope that I think makes grieving difficult. The hope. Yes. So you have to keep going until the hope completely dies. It's no longer a reality. Like, I don't even ever want to see myself with that person again. Or, you accept it. And I think it could be related to death. Even for me, it's a lot of stuff that happened after my dad's passing that I knew would not have happened if he was here. Not necessarily that it was a good or bad thing, but the way when your reality changes, you become a new person. So either it makes you a stronger person or something, even with me doing this podcast, it came from, the death of my dad, because this is he didn't podcast, but he would always record himself just talking about topics like this. And it's like, this is how I can connect with him while he's not here. So I think it relates in any situation.
Yeah, well, I think what you're talking about right now is the collateral beauty of death, or the collateral beauty of loss. There's always this beautiful offshoot that happens, and you just have to look for it. Notice when I'm talking about go ahead and feel whatever's coming up for you. What do I mention first? Feel the joy. Feel the relief. There's always positive feelings that come up. Negative feelings tend to feel more intense in the body. They tend to hold more weight in our stories. So we focus on them more. They're easier to focus on. They're easier to grab our attention, and we can't let go. But meanwhile, there's these positive things happening, and they don't feel as intense, so they don't get as much of our attention. But I guarantee they're there. There's always something positive or beautiful that comes from loss. Always. And you just mentioned it right here. Now look at you.
Yeah.
Out here shining for the world, This is collateral beauty of your father's passing, and I'm sure there's other things too.
I want to get into guilt when it comes to grief. Now, there's two different points I want to get into. But first, I guess when we can talk about loss, or whether that be through death or relationship or job, the guilt you feel when you feel like you could have done something different to change the circumstances of the situation. How that impacts the grief. Because it's one thing to feel for the loss, but then also dealing with, okay, I played a part in the loss, or I could have avoided this loss. How do someone navigate that and grieve?
Yeah. So this is a really interesting phenomenon. And human beings always do this when they experience intense pain or tragedy. For example, I went backpacking once, and while I was on my trip, across from the lake, someone fell down a cliff, and he became so injured that he couldn't, get himself to help, and he ended up passing away that night. And we couldn't get to him. It was this extreme tragedy. I had to do a lot of work with my therapist afterwards to work through that trauma.
Imagine.
But it was really interesting listening to the conversations of the people at the campsite that I was with. Immediately they went into this, he shouldn't have been hiking during a thunderstorm, at that elevation, or he should have worn different shoes, or he should have this, or he should have that, right? This is something that humans do. Anytime there's something painful, we go into this what could have been done differently? Okay, so now that I know what could have been done differently, now I know exactly what not to do in the future. I will never experience that pain.
Mm-hmm.
Almost like I have this little plan in place that I will never experience tragedy again, or I will never experience that intense pain again because I know what could have been done differently. Defense mechanism, whatever you want to call it. This is what happens, right? So as it pertains to death, I could have done this differently. I should have stepped in here. I should have said these things. I could have done all these things. It's simply this orientation process that happens in us so that the next time we're in that position, we know exactly what to do and that person
You
won't
want to
die.
avoid it, yeah.
And I'll never have to feel that again.
Mm-hmm.
So sometimes just simply understanding what mechanism is happening in your head will relieve you from it. Because even as I'm saying it out loud, do you hear how, I don't want to say silly it is, but how much it doesn't make sense?
Right.
Death is going to happen because we die.
Yeah.
We die. Tragedies are going to happen because people make mistakes. Like life gets really, really shitty sometimes. And there isn't anything that we can do. It just is part of our stories for all of us.
Right.
All of us have it. So if you can just recognize, oh, my brain's doing that thing that's telling me, oh, if I did this and did that, and it's trying to prepare me for the next death, then you can kind of release it and let it go. You know, this isn't serving me. It's not a good use of my energy, and I can't protect myself from more death in this lifetime. It's going to happen again. It is.
The fact that you said that, because I think about that a lot for myself, but I have a 4-year-old daughter, and I'm just like, oh, she's going to have to go through this. I mean, God forbid, not with me anytime soon, but even like with her grandpa, I never got a chance to meet my grandparents, but she's very close with my mom and her dad's mom. And as close as they are, I always think, oh, God, please don't ever take them from her earlier. Like, she's going to have to experience that. And it breaks my heart for her because I'm still not equipped with what I'm dealing with the deaths that I've experienced. But that leads me to think, I feel like for the longest, psychology and faith, as far as religion, has been something that people treat as you need one or the other. So when it comes to like situations like this with death, I have people who've been through traumatizing situations and are grieving. And I usually say, hey, have you tried therapy, or did you go to therapy? And I grew up around a lot of religious people. My family is Muslim, and death is, at least in the Muslim culture, death is just something you spend, like, the religion prepares you for. It just says, like, as we know, death is a norm. But even at funerals, like when I was crying at my dad's funeral, you don't do that. You don't cry. You don't, like, So I want to hear your perspective, or for people out there who are stuck with, whether it's not just religion. Some people just want to deal with their grief on their own, but the importance of going to therapy for it, like, how it's not one or the other. What's your take on that when it comes to religion and psychology or therapy when it comes to dealing with grieving?
I in my practice, okay, so during the introduction, you mentioned that I had 8 years experience as a psychotherapist. I actually retired my license because I believe there's too much of a split between the two. And it's important in my practice to integrate spirituality because we're whole beings. It's not just one or the other. And psychology gets pushed into a place where we have to have, quantifiable evidence to back up diagnosis. We have
Science
to, show our processes and all, and it turns it into this cold science when I don't believe it should be. I'm not saying that there's no value in that at all. It is valuable, even when it's used as just a cold science. But I have seen tremendous results when we mix the two, and we allow a person's faith or their energetic work or whatever it is, to come into the counseling room. We make huge strides forward way faster than if we
I
just
completely
do
agree.
psychotherapy.
Oh, and I meant to ask in the beginning, what exactly is psychotherapy? What is the difference between psychotherapy, counseling, psychology?
uh, uh,
I
really,
because I know
the
I have
diff-
that question, but people, I'm sure, like people, are like, oh, I think I'm looking for a counselor or a therapist, or so. I just want to be able
yeah,
to, to discuss the
yeah.
differentiation.
So counselors don't need quite the schooling that a psychotherapist
Okay.
needs. So to become a psychotherapist, you have to, yeah, it's a pretty rigorous training. You have to get 3,000 clinical hours before you can even sit to take the exam. And then
Oh
when you
wow.
take the exam, then you become licensed with your state. And then
Mm-hmm.
you have to work within a lot of parameters. So, I mean, there's just a ton of education, experience, and you have to work under a lot of rules. And that makes some people very comfortable,
Mm-hmm.
um, because I guess people have a little more faith that this person's a real authority on
Right.
the subject. Um, Now, having retired my license, really the only difference between what I was doing as a psychotherapist, I don't need to use air quotes, that doesn't
Yeah.
make sense, but what I was doing as a psychotherapist and what I do as a counselor, I can't formally diagnose people.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I can talk about diagnosis with people, but I can't say, no longer can I say, I'm diagnosing you with bipolar disorder.
Okay.
And I don't, there are some like privacy rules that I no longer have to operate with. And that's really the only difference.
Oh, so how do you avoid diagnosing people? Do you usually just tackle the emotion they're dealing with without connecting it to a diagnosis?
Yeah, I rarely diagnose people before because it typically isn't helpful. I'd rather look at the person as a whole.
I love that.
Oftentimes that label of a diagnosis, people, they get they get stuck in that, and that's how
Yeah.
they see themselves.
Yeah.
I am a borderline. Well, no, you're not a borderline. You have some traits that fit into this category
Mm-hmm.
that we can work on as, with your whole mind, body, spirit. We can work on this to make your life better. But again, that's just the way I practice. So it's not a huge difference for me. Not a huge difference in the way that I practice.
I love that. I might need to see you after after we do this interview. So I mentioned I have another point when it comes to guilt, and I actually have one of our listeners send in a scenario question of something that they're dealing with. They want to know the guilt of not grieving. So this is what he wrote.
I love this already.
My
Yes.
biological father passed away not too long ago. I lived with my grandmother who raised me alone, and that was her son. Of course, his passing affected her, which was hard on me. However, he wasn't there for me consistently as a father figure. His passing didn't really affect me emotionally, and I remember when my grandmother was grieving and crying, and when she just found out he passed away, and she looked at me and said, "Why aren't you crying?" I didn't really know what to say in the moment. I said, "I don't know, I just don't want to make you more sad." So after that, I battled internally on whether I should not be sad myself or at least grieving my father. But then after speaking to some close people to me and figuring things out, I realized that it's okay to not necessarily grieve someone, no matter who it is, and just to be there for the people who are heavily affected. I don't know, my family situation is just different, I guess. But for me, just because someone is blood doesn't automatically make a person close enough to grieve them when they leave.
Yes.
Yeah. So what is your standpoint on that? Because I know in addition to this person.
Can you tell?
Yeah. That is a battle. Because I can't imagine like not grieving. We look at things like my mom, my dad, my sister, my brother, and I've heard so many times people use the word, when like I had a friend who father wasn't in their life, and I asked, how do you feel? Numb. Like, I don't know. You don't want to say I don't care, but I feel like that is a grief in itself, grieving what you can't grieve, because then you're put in this uncomfortable situation, I guess, not morally, but like how we look at life. So now you're like, my dad passed, and it's like, this person's not crying, so you're probably making other people uncomfortable. I can imagine for the grandmother, you'll feel bad my grandmother feels bad that I'm not crying. So Yeah, how does someone deal with that?
Ooh,
And should they feel bad?
no, hell no. No.
Okay, well,
No.
there's your answer.
No.
There's your answer, Sincere.
I feel very strongly about the topic of grief. And if you want to learn more, check out my YouTube channel because I have a
Yes.
video on this that I love. So, grief is something that is imposed upon us most of the time by organizations, people. It's a control tactic used. Now, biologically, grief is a normal emotion when we've actively hurt another. Okay, we are actually built to experience. Did I say grief or guilt? Did I say
You said
wrong?
grief.
Anyway.
Okay, so guilt.
Okay. Yeah. So biologically, we are built to experience guilt when we've hurt another. Okay. Because as a species, we need to not hurt one another. So we've got this feeling that comes up that is made to like keep us from hurting one another. But parents and churches and governments, like they've learned that we respond very strongly when we feel guilty about things, right? So we've been told, oh, you're supposed to act like this, you're supposed to feel like this, you're supposed to say these things, these are all the things that you're supposed to do, and if you don't, you should feel guilty. When the reality is, if I'm feeling okay today, I should go ahead and feel okay today. I shouldn't feel something that you're telling me to feel. That doesn't make any damn sense. This person might feel completely fine about the passing of their biological father. Maybe 10 years from now, they'll experience tremendous grief that they never had a father that was even worth grieving. And that will be the grief process. But when that comes along, you can feel that, and then that's okay. You're supposed to feel what's coming up for you, when it's coming up for you, how it's coming up for you. End of story. There should not be any guilt put on top of that. Oof. I get very excited about this topic because guilt keeps us from experiencing our natural process. And our natural process will always take us to a place of healing and peace if we allow it.
Right.
And guilt just interferes.
I love that you mentioned that theory, like guilt is something like a tactic used to just control us, because I just feel like just hearing this person's story, like, you know, the ideal life is, oh, someone has their mom, their dad, and this is the closest people to you. And then you're supposed to feel this way about them. And it's like, no, everyone's story is their story. And your story is going to bring about the different emotions that's not going to be identical to the next person. And being okay with that, like I feel like it's as obvious as that sound, that is something that even me, with you saying that, I'm coming to terms with, because I feel like naturally with humans we're driven by our ego, so we're gonna do the things that feel natural to us. But then there's this guilt because there's this script that whoever created for us to follow, whether it's within your religion, within your family. So when you are doing the opposite thing, or you're not operating in the way that they're operating emotionally about something, they put guilt on you. And it's like it's hard to overcome that, even with you still sticking to what you feel. It's like, I hate that I'm not in formation. So yes, I love that you said that.
So, okay. So remove the word guilt and say the sentence a different way, right? So, I'm watching you. I'm judging you and how you're behaving. I think that you should be doing it my way. And so go ahead and just change how you are and do it my way instead. That's what that means, right? You should be crying at a funeral. You should feel a certain way. That doesn't even make sense. I'm watching him, judging you, and I think you should do it my way. Or feel guilty about it.
Right.
It doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense.
That is so messed up, because I think it takes so much to reach out to the level of confidence after you've been put in a place where you have to program yourself to people want you to think a certain way. And once you reach a point to get to that level of confidence to say, oh, you just want me to do it your way. I'm not going to allow you to make me feel this feeling of guilt. It's easier said than done because of how life has programmed you. Because I know real people who are dealing with the lack of grieving a loved one, because it's like, bro, I didn't know you. I don't know you, and I'm not sad. And not being even able to say that out loud because morally it sounds messed up. Or maybe even having to fake amongst family member to pretend like you're sad. Like it's hard to get to that confident point of like, no, I'm not going to do this, or I don't feel this way, and be comfortable with that. Mm-hmm. Society messed us up a lot. But all right. You tackle so much when it comes to grief. I just want to bring it all together. If you can come up with 3, I guess, key things people can keep in mind when it comes to grieving, and they can hold with them, whether they're having an episode from something that happened yesterday or something that happened 20 years ago. What is that? I guess, what does that look like? Or what are those 3 key points or tools that they should use when navigating grief?
Okay. So my first one is hold on tight, babe, because you're going to feel pretty crazy, and that's okay. My second one would definitely be whatever comes up for you is what is supposed to come up for you, and just go with it. Just go with it. I guess after having this conversation with you, my third one would be grief is inescapable. We all lose important people, situations, relationships. We all do. It's part of the human story. So the more you can embrace that, when it comes to you, just know, all right, now's my time.
Embrace being human. It's like embrace being human. Wow.
Yeah.
Rachel, thank you so much. Can you let us know where we can listen to your podcast, Consent to Treat?
Yeah. So my podcast is called Consent to Treat. I actually have clients that have given me permission to record their sessions. So you can hear real life sessions between me and my clients. And then we have a fun clinical breakdown afterwards. I'm on all platforms. So iTunes, Spotify, Acast, all the good places. You can find me on Instagram.
Yes.
My practice is called Arrive Coach and Counsel. Again, my podcast is Consent to Treat. And my name is Rachel Sievers.
Thank you so much, Rachel. Oh my God, this conversation was everything I knew I needed, and I knew I would get it from you. So yes, you guys, thank you so much for joining us today. Rachel, I'll be connecting with you after this episode so we can discuss when it's airing. And yes, that's all I have for you today. Thank you so much.
Hey, you're welcome. Thank you.
All right. Have a good day.
You too. Bye.
Bye.
That's my girl, Kadi C, the friend that cares more about your growth than your feelings.